Greetings from Ann Arbor, Michigan, a great state and a great place of the great USA. Welcome to our podcast series, and I am promising you that this series is going to be very enlightening, very inspirational, a lot of fun, and something that will really, I think, help you as you walk your path to holiness. This series is going to have a lot of different things that you probably have questions about, but maybe have the opportunity to ask, especially about religious life. Like, what do they do all day? Who are they? Where do they come from? What's it like when a young woman enters religious life? So stay tuned as we will discuss where sisters come from today. Welcome to Lumen Ecclesiae Digital, or as we like to say, LE Digital, live from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm Sister Joseph Andrew Bogdanowitz, a Dominican Sister of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist. And today, I'm very excited to bring to you something very special. I'm going to tell you about a book, And Mary's Yes Continues. Now, you might already have this book, but chances are you might not. But you might want it after this podcast, okay? First of all, let me say very briefly what this is a book about. This book is to really fill a void that is very present and has been for a long time on the lack of information to young women considering a possible religious vocation, to their parents on understanding what in the world their daughters are thinking, to friends, to the church in general. You know, years ago, there were a number of religious women. If you went into a Catholic hospital, you saw sisters. If you went into a Catholic school, you could find sisters. If you went into a Catholic orphanage, if you went into so many different institutions run by the Catholic Church, the sisters were there. Why were they there? Because we sisters are spiritual moms. We mother the world. And we take that very seriously to heart in our vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. We give our lives to God, but we give them as moms, bringing His children, and therefore our children, back home to the Father. So this spiritual motherhood has always radiated out through the church, and I think, I'm not sure, but I would imagine if I wasn't a Catholic, I would many times wonder, what is it about a religious vocation that brings in so many young women? And what do they do? And how do they find joy? And why are they always giggling? And what is it? What's their education? Do they just pray all day? In another segment, we went through actually what our typical day is like. In another segment of our podcast, The Truth Shall Set You Free. But if you watch that one, good, then you're already a bit ahead. But if you haven't watched that one, then you need to. But I am here today to explain to you a great opportunity. As the vocation director of our community for its entire 21 years of existence, I have answered 5,000 billion trillion times, what is a sister and what do you all do and why are you? I don't mind answering it 5,000 billion trillion times, but after a while it began to dawn on me, why do they have to ask that? Isn't there another way that they, living their life of their faith, would have a right to know these things? So how else could they come to the knowledge that they should know if, in reality, there aren't a number of religious women out there today? Because in the area of Ann Arbor, Michigan that we are in, there are Catholic colleges and institutions and hospitals, and yet I can go to them and be there for days, and it's very hard sometimes to even find a sister. And so I'm kind of like, what are they supposed to do? Now, my community, by God's goodness and mercy, is growing rapidly. We are receiving more religious vocations than we can even build for. Aside about that, I want to mention, because you might say, well, how many is a lot? Well, a lot's a lot, but this is what I mean by a lot, by God's goodness. We built our mother house 20 years ago. 4 sisters founded our community. We built it to house 100 sisters. We knew eventually that we would build another large convent in the Dominican order. The monastic term for that would be a priory, and that would have another large number of sisters. Today, we are well over that 100. We actually even have to put sisters, divide their cells, which is the monastic term for our rooms, into 2 and have 2 beds in there and 2 sisters in there because we are out of room. In fact, in the summers, when the sisters come home for their canonical retreats, there are so many there that sometimes the sisters end up in sleeping bags on the floor. Now, they are young. The average age of all these is just 30, of all of us, is just 31 years old. So for them, it's like camping out. So they kind of enjoy it. But I'm just saying, it's not the most monastic manner of living our Dominican life. Do I enjoy it? Yeah, I've done it plenty of times too. However, we are trying to build a monastery. So if you're fitting 130, 40, 50 into 100 space, it's going to be crowded, isn't it? And these vocations continue to come. So we are building in Texas, and we will be opening a second large house to house another 115 of these sisters. That's what I mean by God is being very generous. How many invitations does Mother receive about can the sisters come to teach in our schools? Presently, we have at least 400, and it grows every single day. We don't even have 400 sisters right now. We tend to send them out in groups of 4. So you're getting the idea that there is a vast desire for sisters to return to the Catholic schools, to the Catholic hospitals, to the places we belong with our spiritual motherhood, our consecrated spiritual motherhood, to return to these places. And God in His goodness is certainly blessing our community. But with that blessing, there's a lot of questions that have to be answered. And I do believe, and have always said this, if more young women and their parents and the world in general knew more beautiful sisters, the world would be more sister-friendly and think more in terms of where are more vocations. I think we do this somewhat, I hope we do, with the priesthood, because every single time you go to Mass, there's a priest, or you're not going to Mass. And if you don't particularly like his personality, you can go to another Mass, and there would be another priest there. So you can find a priest and one that kind of fits your needs and perhaps your personality and can really help you. You find a Catholic church and you found the priest. Sisters aren't like that. Or you might have to really look, and it might be a distance away. We have some sisters who entered saying the only sister they had ever really seen before they actually entered, believe it or not, was myself as the vocation director. Young women are capable of heroic courage and heroic decision-making with God's grace. But why is it not more common to see sisters? And I would say with our growth, and I have found this as I travel all over the United States, and I travel beyond, but in particular in the USA to colleges and universities and give talks, young women are so interested in religious life. Many times, so are young men. Why would men be interested? Because that's the complementarity of their masculine holiness. They, if they know a sister, think that that's very special for them. They might have a girlfriend, but they also have a sister friend. Isn't that a nice thing to have? Someone praying for you, someone supporting you, someone believing you that you know is always going to be praying and praying for you specially. What a great gift. And we do that. And so it's a universal desire for family. It's the way I like to say it. We need our spiritual fathers, those are the priests. We need our spiritual mothers, those are religious sisters. Contemplative nuns as well as active sisters, such as myself. Contemplative nuns don't go out into the public. They stay in their monastery and they pray. They do work. They might make the altar breads, or they might make the priest's vestments, or they might have gardens, or they might do a lot of things. They might make stationery and sell it. Some gift to the church, but it's not a personal I see you see me, we're talking. But sisters are different from nuns, contemplative nuns. We have a monastic life, yes, with a lot of prayer, but then we go out into the world to bring Christ to the world through whatever gifts we have as Dominicans, and this has been discussed on numerous podcasts now. We Dominicans preach and teach. And so our forte is really going to be in the classroom. And it can be the little biddies, pre-K, and it can be college and seminarians. All the way through, our sisters are presently engaged in the apostolate, the going out of preaching and teaching, which is Dominican for 800 years, all the way back to St. Dominic himself. Now, again, the problem is, I believe there are a lot of vocations out there that God is calling them, but a number of these can honestly say, how can I find out what that means? And even if a girl doesn't have this vocation and she has the beautiful married vocation or a vocation to a single life with some very special dedication, such as perhaps missionary work or other things, or a consecrated vocation to virginity, whatever is her God-given vocation, she needs to understand them all. My married friends teach me how beautiful marriage is. And I love them, and I love their children, and I love visiting with them and watching mom go into the mode of mother for all these different varieties of ages of their children, and dad being the protector and coming in and putting order into the house that poor mom's worked at but couldn't totally succeed in because she's got the kids all day, and all the beauty that goes into that commitment, which is so beautiful. It is a beautiful sacrament. It is the sacrament of marriage. I love that. I understand that. I grew up with beautiful parents in a beautiful marriage. That was not my particular calling, though I thought about it a lot and loved it. But I was taught by sisters. I was, as I'm mentioning, one of the more rare in today's world young people taught by sisters. I stared at mom and dad at home and wondered if that was my vocation. I stared at sister at school. I had a lot of time with both, actually, because school comprises a big part of a growing child's day, a big part. So I stared at sister a whole lot. And when sister would ask me to stay after school and help her clean the erasers, help her tidy up the classroom, help her do a bulletin board, whatever sister wanted, both my sister and I would say yes. And we'd get mom and say, we can't come home at this particular time because sister needs us. And I realize now, looking back, I had so much joy in being with the sisters. That was growing my vocation. I knew as I was going through grade school, pretty early on, I'm going to be like that someday. They're happy. They pray a lot. My parents think that they're wonderful. Well, why wouldn't I be that then? It just fit all my little kids' criteria of what I could imagine my future would be. And I loved that. And so I think God was very merciful to me to give that to me early on, because that would always have bothered me. I wanted to know the divine plan. I wanted to get on with it, even as a child, which probably is a bit on the unusual, but that was the way He wired me. However, spinning it ahead, when it was time to make the decision and to really do something, I could look back on 12 years of Catholic education and 12 years of sisters teaching me. I knew as much as I could know at that particular point in time, which weren't the details, but it was enough to be able to say, I really got it, what a religious vocation was. I had seen it day in and day out. I understood marriage. I had had boyfriends. I loved guys. They were such a complementarity to my nature. They were so much fun to be with. I loved that. I had beautiful saintly parents. I got that. Now, which one was going to be my vocation? And with prayer, you find yourself leaning in one direction or the other. And so God was leaning me pretty much throughout my life to be a sister someday. Now, how do I say that that was kind of unique? Again, I already mentioned it, the fact that I was taught by sisters. Today, I travel from coast to coast and talk about religious vocations, and I've done it overseas as well. And people smile and stare at me, and I realize they've never perhaps seen a sister, or their image of a sister is not a positive one. And one of the questions we get asked so many times by people who don't understand is, get this, where's your ruler? Now, you might be laughing, but my sense is that gets a little bit old. We do a lot more than that. And that's just, though it might be funny on one level, it just expresses to me, did you ever really understand religious life? Because I believe married people are better if they understand religious life and priesthood. And I believe religious and priests are better if they understand married life, because the two are very similar in their own unique ways. We give the total gift of ourselves to another. The other receives us and gives his or herself back to their spouse as well. And so in religious life, I think about what life would be as in marriage. And sometimes I'll remember that when I'm taking care of a sick sister or a sick child in my class, or I'm called to come to school really early and we've been out at some function really late at night, and yet we've got to be there early in the morning. Or we have Eucharistic adoration in the middle of the night, and it's my hour, perhaps midnight or 1 or 2, and I get up to pray. And I think of the moms who get up to take care of their children in the middle of the night, because that's their vocation. They want to do that. Yes, they're exhausted, but they would never say, let the kids starve. I am not getting up anymore. They had enough. Nobody who loves would say there's ever enough of the gift of self. So it's in that constant giving of self. So in these two dimensions, I look at the church and I think it's very sad. I think it's more than sad, the fact that there aren't a lot of women religious out there bringing that maternal presence, not just to the individual family that we could have had in marriage, but to the entire world, which is our calling and our vocation. And so I think it's important for everybody to understand things about religious life. Many of the segments in our podcast, which is The Truth Shall Set You Free, will give you the freedom to be able to understand more deeply a vocation that probably is not yours, but it could certainly be the vocation of your daughter. Priesthood could be the vocation of your son. It could be the vocation of a friend. It could be the vocation of someone else's child, and you're beginning to recognize this. Or it could be the vocation of someone who babysits your children. God chooses each of us uniquely for a very special vocation. And whatever that vocation is for each of us, there's only one, and it fits us perfectly. And we grow into it. We grow into it every day of our lives. We never reach a point where we say, I am a perfect sister. I am a perfect mom. I am a perfect spouse. I am a perfect father. We're not going to ever reach that. But God doesn't ask perfection. He asks the fidelity to daily, moment by moment, give the gift of self in the best way that we can. And when we fall, to get up and keep moving. And I think that's what the variety of vocations in the church challenges me to be there, if this was not my vocation, with just as much fidelity and self-sacrifice as any mother would be bending over a sick child, as any father would be worried about what is best for this family and this situation. All these things are universals for all of us in the particular mode that we're meant to live them. But again, you would say, well, that sounds good, sister, but how in the world are we supposed to do that? Maybe we don't live close to a convent, and there's no way my children even have ever seen a sister. And yet I could see the seeds of a possible religious vocation in one or two. How do I move from that stagnant place I can't get beyond. What do I do? And there are other opportunities out there. I'm not saying that there certainly aren't, but I am also saying that our community, and me in particular as a vocation director, hearing these questions and really, these people have my heart. I mean, I'm like, gosh, if you had a speck of what I had growing up, why was I so spoiled by God? I wish I could give everyone a bit of that. Well, we can't be everywhere. Nobody can. And yet, through this book, we can come into your family and into your life, and you can share this with your family. Guys have bought this saying, I've always wondered what it is about sisters that I find so attractive about these women. What do you do? And they've got as many questions as the girls do. And so I think this is important for everyone, and it should be in everybody's home. You should have this. It comes out in softback and in hardback. You can get it on sistersofmary.org. The hardback is $26.95 and the softback is $17.95. You need this. And those of you who are perhaps priests, how many of these do you have in your rectory to give to those girls that come and ask you? They always come to you first because they don't know sisters. I might have a vocation to be a sister. I don't even know what it is. What do you think? And you better respond with, I think it's a strong possibility. Because however you respond, Father, that girl will think you're like God speaking to her. And if you respond with a question mark in your face, she's going to say, oh, he doesn't see it. And she's going to go away. And perhaps a vocation was lost. So your response is essential. Your response, parents, and I deal with parents like crazy because every vocation usually is going to have two parents, sometimes more and sometimes sadly less. But parents are essential to a young woman. Remember, women are very relational. They're going to test out their thoughts and their theories with someone they believe in and someone they trust and someone who can put them on the right path. And when you bring them this and say, read this, I've read this, or let's read this together. Let's discuss this. Let's discuss the theology of religious life. Let's discuss the philosophy at whatever level the young woman is in. Let's discuss some of the history of religious life. Let's discuss these individual sisters who are giving their vocation stories, and no two are alike. God gets us wherever we may be, and no two of us are in the same place because God loves us that uniquely. And there's a lot of very interesting sisters' stories in here. So you will learn about the church's teachings and the history and the strength of the religious vocation. In it also are many pictures. These pictures just kind of lighten it up, and you can just see such an abundance. I don't believe you'll be able to see them if I hold them up, but if you get your book, they're all in there. And perhaps you can see that's just a group of our sisters sitting on the hill right after a very violent soccer game. And I don't know who won, but thank goodness I don't see any cast or broken bones in this particular picture. But that can happen too because they pour their entire selves into everything. Look at and enjoy some of the other podcasts, and you'll be able to see a lot of this come true. A lot of the podcasts come true in this particular book, which has a summary of all these kinds of things. Also in here, we really wanted to highlight, there are a number of sisters who wrote chapters in here. And they come at it from their own perspectives, their own backgrounds, their own histories, things that have interested them and how they found their religious vocation. Again, depending on the age level that they might be teaching, they might center in on elementary school children. They might center in on high school. They might center in on college campus ministry. They might center in on offshoots of all the above. But they're all fascinating. The name of the book is And Mary's Yes Continues, because when we make our vows, we say the same thing Mary said when the angel Gabriel appeared and asked her to be the mother of God. She could have said no. She had a free will. God will never interfere with our free will. He was crucified due to obedience to our free will. He didn't ask it. He didn't want it. He accepted it for the price of our redemption. but we are the ones who did that. So if that was such an incredible gift of self in obedience to our free wills, he is never going to force anything on us, not even himself. And so in this is the invitation to do the Father's will. In this is the necessity to know before we can love and we can serve. In the old Baltimore Catechism, why did God make us? To know him, to love him, to serve him. If we don't know someone, we can't love them. We get to know them, and then love all of a sudden is present. We love them because we know them. We know their strengths and their weaknesses. We love them as a total package, so to speak. We just love them beyond sometimes reasoning, don't we? And then what's the next thing that comes in? We want to do something for them. We want to serve them. We want to give them something. Ultimately, we want to give some portion of ourselves. So a vocation is always going to be founded on knowledge, on loving, and on serving. A vocation to religious life, young women need to know religious life. You parents need to understand it so that you can support your daughters. That's very, very important. And that's not as common as you might think it is in today's world, because a lot of parents are more clueless about religious life than their daughters certainly are. Perhaps their daughters have made one of our vocation discernment retreats, and they really come back understanding a lot for that mere 24 hours. But they're coming home to parents who don't have a clue. So they try to tell you, but again, without that experience, you're at a disadvantage, very seriously, I would say. You can make up that space, that distance, by reading this book, And Mary's Yes Continues. Again, it is available on our community's website, sistersofmary.org, and pray daily that, like Mary, you will say yes to the divine will. May God bless you, and thanks for listening. So if you like the material on this particular podcast, then please click on the next podcast for another fascinating story.